Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with introductions while these guys seat themselves. I'm really excited to have these four panelists that represent a really broad variety of perspectives in wearables. I've got a journalist slash analyst slash seer, futurist. I've got a designer who works in a consultancy. I have a practitioner who works in one of the more established companies in the space, and I have an entrepreneur who's doing a startup. So, and that sounds like you guys are going to walk into a bar and we're going to tell a joke. Okay, so really interesting diversity of backgrounds, and it should be a really great discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce these guys. So first on my left is Leah Hunter, who turns out is the co-creator of Design of Wearables. Leah is a writer for Fast Company, and when we last crossed paths, you were AVP of Insights and Innovation for Idea Couture, which is a strategic innovation consultancy. And just wondering, how did you move from that to writing about all things wearables for Fast Company?
That's interesting. So my career has had three different through lines, and it started immediately after college. One of them was ghostwriting a syndicated column. One of them was working at an ideation think tank. These were all happening simultaneously. And one of them was running a nonprofit at that think tank for kids. And that moment and that job basically shaped my career. So I had been focused on the think tank part of it. I switched back to the writing part of it because Idea Couture started publishing a magazine that was about the intersection of design thinking, culture, and business. And that led me to a Fast Company conference, and that led me to taking crazy, copious notes at the event, offering them to the guy who was running it. I didn't know he was the executive editor of Fast Company. He offered me writing it. It was amazing.
Great. Okay, and I've been asked to have you turn on your mics and use them. Okay, and then next to you is Eric Olson. Eric's the director of design at Karten Design in LA, which is a product innovation consultancy that apparently has been in this space for 15 years. And Eric, I'd love to hear from you. You've been working on wearables for 15 years, so can you tell us about a product that was in this space 15 years ago, and what were some of the lessons learned from that first experiment in wearables?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that we were among the people that were inflicting Bluetooth headsets on you, and I'm glad to say now that they only see themselves activated in the drivers of cabs and limo drivers now. But
we appreciate those guys.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really how we started. We had done some other products, similar sort of wearable products, things that combated seasickness and those types of things. But really, Bluetooth headsets were the first time where we were responsible for taking brand new technology when Bluetooth was just coming out as a wireless protocol, cramming it into as small electronic package as possible, and trying to get it somewhere on the body where people could wear it consistently. And you know, we have lots of learnings along the way and lots of failures, but the first obviously was the fact that the one thing that everybody's ears have in common is nothing. And there is no one-size-fits-all, and I'd say that might be sort of a metaphor for everything that we've learned in the next 15 years, which is there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And I'd say now that that has transcended to be a UX problem, it becomes even a bigger problem. So sorry for all the Bluetooth headsets.
Great, thanks. And next we have Anna Rosario. Anna is a user experience researcher at Jawbone. She recently joined us from Intel, where she was in the User Experience Research Lab, which some of you may have heard of. It's under Genevieve Bell, who's had a lot of press lately. She's a guru of ethnography for innovation. And Anna has a really interesting story about how she got into the User Experience Lab, so
yeah,
I'll let her share that.
I just shared this story with Katy a few days ago. So it happened that I was at Intel as a rotation engineer. So I don't know if you've heard about rotation engineers program. Like, they give you the opportunity of being a free resource for the company. So for a year and a half, you get to pick what group you want to work on. So for you to discover what's your passion. So I was into my second rotation doing forecasting for microchips. So I was in MMBP, Microchip Marketing Business Planning Group. And at that point, we were based here in Santa Clara, but at that point I was in Oregon for a talk with Genevieve Bell, which I didn't know who she was at that point. So, and this was like, almost 4 or 5 years ago. And here comes this woman, super engaging, and she starts talking about user experience. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is, but I really want to do that. So I leave the talk, and I go out with the people in my cohort, and we go out for drinks, and we're having fun, and I can't stop thinking about Genevieve Bell. This woman's amazing. And I get back to the hotel room, and I email her like at 3 a.m. in the morning, and like, Genevieve, I'm a free resource. Like, I really want to work for you. I have one rotation left, and I just want to know what user experience is and how can I bring my skill set into this space. So within 15 minutes, she replied to me at 3 a.m. in the morning, and she's like, sure, let's get together tomorrow in a coffee shop in the middle of Portland. And I'm like, yes, let's meet. And I didn't have a car. I didn't know how to move around Oregon. So I was like, I just need to talk to this woman. And she gave me the opportunity to come to the group and do research in the mobile space. And I worked with her for almost 4 to 5 years.
And most recently what was some of the work you did in wearables?
Yeah, so at that point, Intel was very interested in understanding what was the wearable landscape and strategically how Intel should be thinking about this space. So I had the opportunity to do a lot of strategic type of research just to understand the front end and to understand how people see the wearable space and how the industry is addressing the space. So it was really amazing because I got the opportunity to come up with very different type of research just to understand how people feel emotionally towards the things that they wear. And not thinking about what kind of devices and gadgets, but how do we think about the wearable space in a different way, thinking about the things that we put in our body and what do they represent to us.
Great. We'll look forward to hearing more about that. And finally, we have Andreas. Andreas was previously the director of brand design for Citrix SAS. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. And you recently left to start up SmartStones, and you had a really compelling story about the experience that led you to that, and maybe you could share that with the audience.
Sure. Yeah, so Katy just said I was at Citrix. I worked in the SaaS division, which is, you guys might have heard of GoToMeeting and some of these other products, online collaboration stuff. Going back a little further, prior to Citrix, I was there for about 5 years. Prior to Citrix, I worked at Philips Design, and I was in the North American studio, but then I would go to Europe quite a bit and work with their R&D teams in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And what was really special about that time at Philips was Philips is widely known for doing research and design on sort of really the 15, 20-year horizon, right? And so they were already doing work, published work around wearables, around smart fibers, around clothing and fashion and embedded technology in your skin and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So I was exposed to that at a fairly early stage in my career. And then kind of switched gears, go back to Citrix, and then Citrix is a software as a service business. So that's my frame, right? And but what Katy is saying is what happened is the sort of the spark for all of this to say, well, what am I doing with wearables? About 2 years ago, my mom came to visit with me for her 70th birthday, and she came down with pneumonia. She went to the ICU. She was intubated in the ICU for about 7 weeks. Intubated means when they have a tube in your throat breathing for you. And she had her arms tied to the side of the bed for 7 weeks. And so I just imagined, because she couldn't communicate verbally, and she had no motor skills to really write anything. So the only way that we could communicate is if I physically touched her skin and looked her in the eyes and could communicate just by being. And it sounds kind of wacky or, sort of woo-woo, but we were able to communicate. And I imagined, well, what if I could design something that could just go in her hand, that when I wasn't there, she could tap it on the side of the bed, or she could shake it, or do very simple gestures when I wasn't there to let me know how things were going. If things are going good, not good, I need you. And so that's the inspiration for SmartStones. And we've been doing market research now, primary, and realize there's actually a market for it. So anyway, that's what we do.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to start off with a question for Leah, and obviously the rest of you should jump in. But Leah, you recently wrote an article in Fast Company. I think it was titled "Are Wearables Over?" And so I'm just wondering, should we all be looking for different jobs, or what conclusion did you come to? What's the problem in the wearable space, and is the future bright, not bright? What do you think?
The future is incredibly bright. So to clarify, my beat for Fast Company is IoT, emerging tech, cognitive computing, and wearables rolls into that. And that was some sassy editing for the headline. But it sort of raised the question, okay, so I did some searching on eBay, and there had been some stories that were showing up in the media about how there were a lot of products sitting out there and being sold and being resold. And I was like, okay, nobody has cited any numbers with that. Is that true? So I did my own secondary research to see, why is this happening and what are we seeing? And it's true that a lot of things are being resold for various reasons. I mean, there are product recall things, there are people selling extra wristbands, there are all sorts of issues that could have pointed to. But for that particular article, I did interviews with the CEO of Fitbit. I did an interview with Travis Bogard, who's a VP at Jawbone. I did interviews with a bunch of other people just to see what their take on the growth of the industry was. And the ultimate conclusion there, and my firm belief, why did I help organize this program, is that wearables have some challenges, particularly around mainstream adoption, but it's a category that's going to keep growing as long as people keep their focus in the right places.
And so what do the rest of you think? Eric, we talked about some of the kind of primary challenges for growing the industry. What are the barriers to mainstream adoption? Especially from a perspective of a user experience, where does it need to go to make these products, indispensable for people?
I think that was a perfect segue of what we're starting to hear as well from our clients in terms of understanding those challenges. And I think the biggest challenge is one that Andreas articulated the best, which is so many of them are technology looking for a home. There are some incredibly smart people out there that are doing some incredible things with technology that are just really not as focused as perhaps they should be on what the end user is looking for and what is actually going to change behaviors. So, we've started just a whole mind shift in product design away from device-based, a love of shiny objects, which I'm as guilty of as the next industrial designer, and much more of armchair psychologists. And now we're hiring cognitive scientists and people that come from anthropology to help us understand what are those keystone habits, what are the things that people really need to make their lives better, not just keep selling to the same sort of early adopters, sort of beginning of the bell curve. Yeah, quantified selfers. So I think that's the focus is why. As Samsung said to us when we were working with them in San Jose, well, we can make anything, but what should we make?
Well, can I build on that for a second? I mean, I was really struck by what Andreas said. I play in technology a lot and I learn about it, but I don't actually care that much about technology. I care about what it can do for humans, and it feels like heart and love is a lot of what's missing. It's all plastic and chips, and there needs to be a stronger emotional reason for being. So what you said was really powerful to that end.
Thanks.
Andreas, were you thinking about making a wearable, or was this actually a problem and you backed into the solution? Which way did it go?
Yeah, it was entirely driven by the problem. I think we are in that place where open source and all, we're entering a world where hardware is becoming open source, right? Standards are becoming so ubiquitous that you can literally snap together parts, right, and make things. And with that kind of change, you worry less about, like what you're saying, what you can make, and you think more about what are some really big, hairy problems I want to solve, and how can I do it in a really economical way that's really exciting and cool, and that you enjoy. And you wake up in the, every day, as an entrepreneur, you got to wake up each day, shake yourself, shake off the dust, and say, okay, I'm going to go at it again, right? Because you're building something from nothing, right? And that's what's really cool about being a designer, right? Is you start with nothing, right? And you take inputs and you combine and you create a vision. And usually that vision comes through a story that's rooted in something as an insight. So if you can hook onto an insight that people get and figure out your story, and then design solutions broadly that can kind of deliver on that promise, then you don't have to be wedded to that one solution. You can figure out which solution is right. So this is one of about a dozen solutions that we are working on right now.
And you and I have had a lot of conversations about not just the functionality, but the appearance of the device. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so this is a great conversation because like one of the things that we were exploring for the longest time was to understand why do people wear things. So for this, some of the research methodologies that we use were participatory design exercises where we let people create things and let them explain to us like why would they were creating those type of things. We also went to participants' homes and we asked them like, show us the things that you wear on a daily basis and tell us the story behind those things. Now I have this thing that I walk around the street, and if I see somebody with like a cool bracelet or something, I ask them, like I take a picture of it, and I ask them to tell me the story behind it. And we just collected a lot of data that is kind of supporting these findings a lot. And the things that that we learn a lot is that people wear things because it makes them feel emotionally connected to something or someone. So like we wear a COS bracelet, or we wear the bracelet that my grandma gave it to me, my best friend gave it to me, my boyfriend gave it to me. And that's why I wear these things, and that's why I keep them for a very long time. So we kept wondering, like, how can we start creating technology that we wear on our bodies that help us connect at that emotional level with the things that are in our body? And that's something really interesting that came across all the different type of research methodologies that we use. Another thing that also came out was that when you put something on your body, it immediately becomes a representation of you. So that's where fashion comes in. Like we can argue that we don't care or that we do about fashion, but when making a decision on what to wear or what not to wear, you're immediately caring about what people see on you. So like we have to start thinking about wearables as something different from gadgets. It's like these things are saying things about ourselves to the world and to ourselves. And that's the way that we should be thinking about this thing, is trying to create the underlying experience for these devices.
If I can kind of add on to that, and what's interesting is there are times when people want to show off what they're wearing, and then there are people that want to have it underneath everything else, right? So people who have pacemakers or other types of things, or one of the things we learned is we started to look at what they call the PERS market, which is the lifeline, the I fall and I can't get up stuff, right, the help button. And what's interesting about that business is that idea of I fall and I can't get up was the greatest thing that created the market, and it's been the greatest barrier that prevents it from scaling beyond what it is, right? Because people see there's a stigma tied with that. And you don't know that stigma until you sit down with people and you ask them, why don't you like that thing, right? And they say, well, I like the utility, I like the idea of the utility, but it's a scarlet letter, it's a flag that says I'm fragile and weak, and I don't want to see myself in the mirror that way. And you gotta like understand those underlying motivations. And sometimes it's what people say, and it's sometimes what people do that will tell you those signs. So really get good at recognizing patterns and reading signs. And you don't always get it right, but that understanding is very important.
And so it's interesting thinking about the category of safety in wearables. There's a company called Sense6 that is working on a necklace that is all about helping, young women walking through urban areas late at night feel safe. And it's this beautiful necklace. I mean, they were still refining the designs last time I saw it. But it's similar in concept to the, like, help me, I'm in trouble. And I had never really considered until you said that there might, I wonder how I would feel walking around with that on my neck. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of jewelry, it's lovely, it keeps me safe, but would it create a perpetual cognitive reminder of, unsafety all the time, a sense of unease?
Sorry, can I? Okay. Yeah. So what's interesting about that is like that wearables like have the opportunity to do something that other technologies do not enable us to do. It's like try to be disconnected of the digital world. It's not bringing the phone and the text messages into the wrist, but it's like giving us space to actually feel like we are safe. And I think that's something that women sometimes relate when we go out running. You have to carry your phone with you because if something happens, you want to feel that you can call someone. But you also like enjoy when you can just go out for a run and not have any technology with you. But what if something happens, right? You need to carry your phone with you. So I feel like if we start thinking about like what is the frontier, like what is the new experience that wearables can enable, it's like how can they enable us to be mindful of the moment and start being kind of a way of the fear of missing out, like what's happening in the digital world, like I have to be there all the time, but like allowing me to be present in the now.
Did you want to say something?
I love all these topics, and we've spent the last 8 years designing hearing aids and accessories. So I just, this is, you're speaking my language in terms of the real, true barriers to overcoming stigma that you just really don't understand until you, especially in this case, talk to someone who's 60 or 80 years old, and it's taken them 7 years to finally come to grips to the fact that they have a hearing issue. And I guess, I threatened to put out there some of the lessons that we've learned in the field. One of them that we just learned very recently was about a device that ostensibly you're supposed to go to a restaurant. So if you're hearing impaired, you'd go to a restaurant and you would give this device to your spouse or your dining partner. They'd wear this device and it would beam their voice directly to you, to your hearing aids wirelessly. Awesome, right? And we figured the biggest barrier to that is going to be no one's going to want to carry that around, and their spouse or their dining partner isn't going to want to wear that. But that wasn't the case. Once we actually got it, it was almost counterintuitive. What we found was the biggest barrier to acceptance was people don't want to be a burden to other people. And it was something that just, wasn't in the forefront of our mind, and not until we got to pretty far down the road to the point where, you're prototyping things and you're showing things to people to say, oh, and their spouse is saying, I'll wear it. I don't care. Go, oh, I don't want you to have to burden, like clipping that tiny little thing on your lapel just so we can have a conversation for the first time in 10 years. Yeah, I don't want to burden you, But it's amazing what people won't do.
Do you think that's generational? Like there's boomers are kind of like they're a little bit considerate about that kind of stuff.
It's going to change. So yeah, I think it's a mix of for sure.
Yeah, I don't see 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds really being that considerate.
I think we're going to see it. I think that's why the wearables are going to be really interesting to see as the boomers start doing whatever and not caring. It'll be interesting.
I was about to say that was not generational because I feel that, but I recently did a test on Facebook that a friend posted on their wall, and it's like seeing if it could guess how old you are, what gender you are, and what you enjoy. I came out as a 50-year-old man who is slightly balding, but really active in the world. So maybe it's generational.
And I guess, and I know the topic is wearables, right? But there's only so many places on your body that you can wear things, right? And so it's, and I liked you talked about IoT or connected devices, right? Because it's, anyway, I'll sort of put out there, my belief is that, we're kind of in the coming of age of an ambient experience, right? Like, that we're entering a world where technology just recedes, it becomes way more transparent, and it just is pervasive, and you can just be and do things, right? And sensors are really kind of sort of driving a lot of that force. It's the tailwind, it's a lot of sensor availability and horsepower, like capacity, right? You can make little things do almost nothing these days. You know this, right? So, in a world of ambient experience, you have all these choices of things. Ultimately, the big players are going to be the people that, understand which, is it a real estate game, right? So are you going to own the arm? Are you going to own the platform as sort of a centralized, like a smartphone, right? A smartphone becoming kind of the, it's the dashboard for all your data, right? It's the all-knowing, all-seeing. Right, so but you think about like, okay, hypothetically, if you have a smartphone or a device as your dashboard, how many things in the world do you want to track or do, or what I mean? It's at some point there's going to be a little bit of reconciliation on that, right? Where you say, okay, there's I did a conference a couple of years ago. I helped put it on down in Santa Monica, and we had an economist come from ING, and he said, what's happening right now? It's this term, look it up, it's called creative destruction, right? It's economical time, like, what does that mean, right? You look it up, and it's amazing, because a lot of your standards are sort of falling down, a lot of the barriers to entry are going away, a lot of the public policy is starting to come into force, where it enables people to do sort of this maker's world, right? And so you have this massive proliferation of creativity that just generates, right? But at some point in the next 5 or 6 years, there's going to be some reconciliation. So who are the real winners? Right, and you don't know, but the key to think about this is, do you want to own a part of the body, as you come up with ideas as a business, or do you want to own a domain or a concept or a demographic or a region, right, in a certain sense, right? Because, yeah, so just something to think about, because you only have so many parts on your body that you can attach things to.
Well, that is if you keep thinking about wearables like gadgets, right? Like we're right now wearing clothing, and this is technology, right? And so one of the things that I did was like I look a lot into technology, like what kind of things were happening in the academia, and what kind of research were they doing for the future. And a lot of things are happening around fabrics and textiles, like making fabric smart. So I don't know if you've heard about Sabine Seymour. She's a curator, very known curator for fashion tech. And some of the things that she was sharing with us, and I heard some speakers in New York talking about like fabric that can expand and contract depending on your body temperature. Like imagine like being able to embed microcontrollers and microprocessors at a molecular level in your fabric, and then the fabric can change colors. And you can travel with that jacket and be able to change the molecule like it was a pixel. And all this type of research is happening in academia, and it's like there's a lot of things still that need to happen for these things to be available to the mainstream. But wearables are not going to be gadgets. Like everything around us might be smart. Even the table and all these things are going to start working together in a comprehensive way, and are going to be able to do things on our behalf and do amazing things to make us feel a certain way. I don't even know how to finish.
And to build on that, there are people doing things in spaces adjacent to wearables, that are amazing, that are starting to be mainstream, like Cute Circuit. They're look them up. Their dresses have LEDs. I mean, right now it's sort of more fun than functional, but amazing. Iris Van Herpen has stuff on the catwalk in Paris that is 3D printed, that is mind-blowingly gorgeous. You should know her name. And we were actually, I was with Eric at an event run by Intel at the Art Center in Pasadena, and there was a woman there by the name of Meg Grant who was presenting prototypes of fabrics that were woven with photovoltaic threads so they could do passive energy collection. And there are things like that. Katy, you emailed a question about, some of the barriers in this. I think a lot of the barriers are more conceptual, rather. I prefer to talk about the conceptual barriers rather than the technical ones, but there are the technical ones, like battery life. Batteries don't last long enough. Human beings don't like to sit and plug this thing in and charge it all the time. We are in a situation where, if to your point, Anna, this is a representation of me, I never want to take it off. I don't take off my necklaces, ever. I wear them in the shower. I wear them everywhere. Show me a wearable that I can take in the shower and never have to take off to charge, and I will wear it forever, potentially.
So since we're opening the wearables series here, I'll ask a question that I think is on the minds of a lot of people working in the space, which is, we see the 800-pound gorilla about to enter with an iWatch potentially, and what kind of experience could Apple deliver that could start to, some people think that's what it's going to take to really get people to open up to the experience. What could Apple do that could, really grow the market, start to change people's minds about, thinking that this is just a rubbery gadget that people wear, when they want to collect data about themselves because they're geeky QSers. Go for it.
I was actually thinking about them in the bathroom. I will not, yes,
I
I'll
always
admit
think
to you
about
that I
Apple
was
in the
like
bathroom.
standing in the corner of the bathroom making notes on my notepad. There were like 2 women who walked in. So sorry if I was being creepy making notes in the bathroom. Apple's not the only one who's done it, but they make things fun in a really smart, brainy way. Like when they started playing in color, they were the first people to do that. And iconic brands sort of do those fun things. I think Virgin also has done that really well in the airline space. They had singing and dancing on their, safety videos, and then all of a sudden they've got amazing glowy lights. And, I think about people like Salvador Dali. He made lobster dresses. Like, wearables right now take themselves so effing seriously, and it's all about, like, technology.
Mine's bright orange.
Yours is bright orange. I mean, I think some people are doing it. Like Tory Burch is doing it really well with fashion, and there are people playing in color. But still, I look at that and it feels.
You can say it. That's fine.
It feels. I love you, Katy.
Now you have to say it.
No, it does not feel like fun to me. It feels like work still, and it looks like work, and it looks like. Yeah, it looks kind of boring. Sorry. But then again, I wear spikes on my shoes.
I didn't
so.
design it, so I'm okay. What do you guys think? Is Apple gonna change this space? Are they gonna deliver the winning experience, the killer app?
It's like, don't quote me on this later if they are successful.
I think we're being videotaped.
But I think they bring a few things. They bring brand recognition, and people are going to be willing to try it just because it's Apple, right? They are very successful at creating intuitive experiences. Intuitive, right? Like the first time I grabbed an iPhone, I really didn't know how to use it. We believe they're intuitive, but once you learn how to use it, you know, but they're not really that intuitive. But I think what they really bring to the table is the fact that they have a very integrated system, right? Access to content. You feel like all your devices are acting for you and you're not fighting with your technology. I remember doing research when the iPad came out. And so I was in the field doing research for netbooks. I don't know if you guys remember netbooks, but we had netbooks for a while. And we were doing research for that, and the iPad just launched. And we shifted the research, and we were like, let's talk to iPad owners, like the people that just bought the iPad. If we can find them, let's talk to them. And some of the things that we learned is that people were buying the iPad without knowing why they were buying the iPad. They just wanted to feel that they owned this really amazing product. It was Apple. And one of the participants talked like, I bought it for myself, but now it became the product, like the device for the families, the coffee table device. Whoever we are hanging out, the iPad is just sitting there. We can all be hanging out in the same room, and I can be watching TV, and my kids can be just playing in the iPad. So it allowed them to be together. It created an experience, like the whole family being together in the same place. There was another story that a participant said that he's like, we went to the park, and I left the iPad on the roof of the car, and when they drove away, the iPad fell back, and it broke. And he was like, but I was not worried, because there was nothing stored in the iPad, right? The iPad was just like a gateway to the content. So it also created a peace of mind that the valuable information was not stored in the iPad. So it became just like a portal to their whole life. So I think that was really valuable that Apple created with the iPad. Access to content from any of your devices, and with iTunes and all the things that they have available for you, they are very capable of creating very robust experiences.
And is that what we want on our wrist?
I don't think we want that on our wrist, but I think we want a system that is connected to the rest of our devices. Like, I don't want this to start getting, like, I don't want to tell this device my story from zero. I want this to know who I am already, because I have a very robust profile in my other devices. So if this can talk to my other devices in a seamless way, it's already like halfway there. Like, I don't think it's gonna be, I don't know what kind of information it is, but like Meg Grant, like she created, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but she created this prototype of gloves. Then when you put them in a specific way, you close the circuitry, and then you can tell a message, and then you can play the message back at you. So she did this with conductive thread, and she was just playing how you can use your body as a way of interacting, like your body as an interface, right? And she was like, imagine if I actually had microprocessors where I can talk to my gloves, and my gloves can talk to my phone, and then it's snowing outside, and I don't want to bring my phone out. I just want to like send a reminder to myself, like when I get home, do this, or remember to do that.
So my hand becomes the interface.
Your hands become the interface. So it's not only this, like you can interact with your whole body in many different ways. And what's really interesting about people like Meg Grant is that she's like a fashion designer. She's also a designer. She's a prototyper, and like she's playing with the body, with ways to exploring. She's playing with your body as an interface, and that makes it very, very interesting.
So Eric, you must have had conversations at Karten about what happens when Apple comes into the space. What's your take on that?
Man. I think first of all, at some point you guys are going to get to talk to your friends across the bay and go, "We told you it was hard." So you'll get your chance. I would be willing to bet you. I really have a lot of faith. We're huge fans of Apple. They've put industrial design on the map, so to speak. I would be willing to bet you that the reason that they're doing it is not because they think they're going to sell 1 billion watches.
What do they think they're going to do?
I don't know. But I have a feeling it's, we didn't know what they were doing when iTunes came out either.
Mm.
And now all of a sudden, the fishhook is in our mouth and we're getting reeled into the boat. I have a feeling there are lots of other reasons why a company like that would make a play like that. At the same time, they're buying Beats. At the same time, they're doing lots of other things. It's as with most things, it's probably complicated.
And so it's maybe not about an on-the-wrist wearable so much as a whole ecosystem.
Maybe the beginnings of capturing data.
Yeah.
Maybe the beginnings of launching into and testing out. And I don't think Google expects to sell 1 billion Google Glass either. But what they're doing is they're learning something that nobody else is learning. They're going to leverage later for something else that will actually be relevant. They're not stupid. You don't think they did their research and went to a 50-year-old woman and said, "Hey, would you want to put an Apple device on your wrist?" And she said, "No." They know. So.
Eric, I think you're really wise to be so circumspect about that because it's true. Yeah, we have no idea why they did it. So this is less a commentary about Apple than more who I think is going to win here. The people who recognize that the device matters less than the data and translating that data into some actionable recommendations. Now, I said this to Katy before we got on stage. No one paid me to do this plug.
Oh, the message from the sponsor?
Yes.
Go for it.
When I was doing our Wearables Dead article, I did this really wonderful interview with Travis from Jawbone, and I heard him say he told me this story that I really loved. He said the most important question that you can be asked, or one of the most important questions, is, "Honey, are you coming to bed?" And you get asked that by your spouse, and I'm like, well, why is that such an important question? Apparently, he has had a whole research team looking at the data behind how that question affects people's behavior. And you would be able to speak to this better than I, but it gets people to go to bed like 35 minutes earlier a night rather than
if you sleep with a partner.
If you sleep with a partner
earlier.
and you're ask that question as opposed to staying up and butzing around and
You
doing
guys
your
didn't
email
know
and
we
whatever.
put cameras in these.
You have to be asked the question. Yes.
It was a survey question. Let's just be.
But what I like about that is then if the okay, so knowing that is interesting, having that data. But then he went on to say that's translated into a recommendation that gets pushed to people about, if you don't have a partner, or even if you do, maybe you usually go to bed at this time, maybe you should consider going to bed. And so translating data into action. People who collect the data win, and the people who know how to translate the data into something that changes humans' behavior, ding, ding, ding. And that could be Apple, or not.
There's a lot of big, enormous medical companies right now that are just doing a huge land grab for data right now. It is the railroad barons heading out to the west, and they're putting down these strange tracks across fields, and you don't know why, but pretty soon they are going to be the keepers of this data. I don't even think a lot of them know exactly why they're doing it, but a lot of the medical companies that we're talking to are, that is a huge thing, and the subject of other conferences that we're not invited to. But yeah, to your point, I think